Today, we're diving into a really powerful idea from the book Manufacturing Consent by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky. It's called the propaganda model, and honestly, it might just change the way you look at the news forever.
Have you ever noticed this? You're scrolling through your phone, you're flipping through channels, and despite all these different options, the big stories, they all kind of sound the same. Well, we're about to unpack a theory that suggests this might not be an accident at all.
And this is the absolute key right here. This isn't about some secret, shadowy group pulling the strings. The authors argue it's way simpler, and maybe even more powerful than that. It's about the system itself, the economic realities of the media industry that naturally shape what we get to see and hear. So think of it like this. Picture a giant funnel. All the raw information, everything happening in the world, all the chaos and complexity gets poured into the top. But before it gets to you, it has to pass through 5 different filters. And what comes out the bottom is that polished, final news product that we read and watch every day. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What exactly are these 5 filters that are supposedly shaping our news? Here's our roadmap. We've got ownership, advertising, sourcing, Flak, and ideology. Each one of these plays a crucial role in, well, filtering the news. Let's break them down. First up is ownership. And this number 5 is a huge deal. According to a lot of research, a tiny number of massive corporations, almost everything you see, hear, and read. Now, the problem is, these parent companies aren't just in the news business. They might also be in, say, defense contracting or telecommunications. So you can see how there might be a subtle, built-in pressure to avoid stories that could harm the company's other business interests. Next up, filter number 2, advertising. Now, here's a little secret about the media business. Most news outlets aren't selling content to you. They're selling an audience. They're selling your attention to advertisers. And since advertisers want to reach people with money to spend, the news naturally tends to cater to more affluent audiences, which can mean that stories about things like poverty or organized labor just don't get as much airtime. The third filter is all about sourcing. You know, a newsroom is a business, and it has to run on a budget. They need a constant, reliable flow of information to fill the 24-hour news cycle. Well, it is so much cheaper and easier to just stick a microphone in front of a government official than it is to fund a team of investigative journalists for 6 months. So over time, the perspectives of these official sources just become the default narrative. But what happens if a story that really challenges the powerful does get through the first 3 filters? Well, that's when you get Flak. And this isn't just a few angry letters. We're talking about organized, heavy-duty pushback. Think lawsuits, advertiser boycotts, op-eds from think tanks, or even coordinated online attacks. The goal is simple, to make it so painful for that news outlet that they'll think twice before publishing a story like that again. And that brings us to the 5th and final filter, ideology. You could call this the master filter, the one that provides the whole framework. It's the dominant shared belief system of a society. Back in the 80s, when the book was written, it was all about anti-communism. After 9/11, it became the war on terror. It basically creates a national us versus them story that makes it really easy to rally public support for certain policies and makes dissent look unpatriotic. All right, so that's the theory. But how does it actually play out in the real world? Let's look at a classic case study from the book that really brings these filters to life. In the 1980s, the authors did this fascinating comparison. They looked at the media coverage of 2 terrible murders. In one case, a Polish priest was killed by the communist government, an official enemy of the U.S. In the other, 4 American churchwomen were killed by the U.S.-backed government in El Salvador. Same crime, but the political context was completely different. And just look at the difference in coverage. It is staggering. The Polish priest was a worthy victim because his story fit perfectly into that anti-communist ideology filter. It was a story about the evil empire. The American churchwomen, on the other hand, were unworthy victims because their story was inconvenient. It complicated the official narrative about U.S. allies. The filters, not the journalists, created this huge disparity. Okay, but that was all back in the 80s. The world has changed a lot since then, right? We have the internet. So the really big question today is, does this model still hold up in the age of blogs, social media, and citizen journalism? Well, there are really 2 schools of thought on this. The pluralist view says, no way, the internet broke the filters. Anyone can have a voice now. But defenders of the model would say the filters haven't disappeared, they've just evolved.
They point to things like social media algorithms that still tend to promote established sources, and the rise of native advertising, which are basically ads that are designed to look exactly like news stories, blurring that line more than ever before.
And if you're looking for evidence that the model is still relevant, just look at this number. Some reports show that a huge chunk of all traffic to news websites, around 70%, is controlled by just a handful of tech giants. So you could argue that we've just traded the old media gatekeepers for a new set of digital ones. The power to filter information is still very, very concentrated. So when all is said and done, what's the main takeaway here? The most important thing to remember is that the propaganda model is not a conspiracy theory. It's not saying that journalists are bad people or that there's a secret plot. It's a tool. It's a lens that helps us see the powerful, often invisible, structural forces that are always at play in shaping the news we get. And this really leaves us with a huge question for the future. With new technologies like Web3 promising a more decentralized internet, is it possible we could finally build a news ecosystem that's free from these kinds of filters? Or will new technologies just create new, unforeseen filters to take their place? It's definitely something to think about the next time you open your news app.